The deposit for Golden Meadows is paid, Mom. It's for the best. My son's voice is smooth, practiced, like he's been rehearsing it in front of a mirror. He places a glossy trifold brochure on my dinner plate, directly over the half-eaten roasted chicken I cooked. The corner of the paper darkens as it soaks up the gravy. It's an act of such casual desecration, it takes my breath away. Golden Meadows. The name sounds like a lie. A cheap pastel painting of a heaven that doesn't exist. His wife Sarah doesn't miss a beat. Her phone is already up, the little red light blinking. A silent predator in our softly lit dining room. She smiles, a wide, bright, toothy expression that doesn't reach her eyes. Her eyes are fixed on the screen framing the shot. Me, the frail old woman. Ethan, the concerned, dutiful son. The brochure, the centerpiece of their compassion. A perfect little tableau of familial love. Making sure Mom is safe and cared for. I can already hear her narrating the caption in her head, adding the hashtags. Family first. Doing the right thing. Elder care. The flash from her phone glints off the crystal water glass Arthur. And I received as a wedding gift 50 years ago. I feel the light on my skin like a physical blow. I am no longer a person. I am content. A prop in the story they are telling the world and perhaps telling themselves. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration. That's what Ethan had said on the phone. Let's have a proper dinner, Mom. The final papers for the land are signed. It's a new chapter for all of us. A new chapter. I had roasted the chicken, the way Arthur loved it, with rosemary and thyme from my own garden. I had used the good china, the plates with the tiny bluebells painted on the rim. I had set the table for a family, for a milestone. I see now that I was only setting the stage for my own execution. My hand holding my fork is frozen in midair. I can't seem to lower it. It feels disconnected from my body, a strange, wrinkled appendage that belongs to someone else. I look from the brochure to Ethan's face. He's not looking at me. His eyes are fixed on a point just over my shoulder, as if studying a particularly interesting spot on the wallpaper. He has the same look he had when he was 12 and broke my favorite porcelain vase, the one my mother brought back from England. A look of feigned innocence, braced for an explosion that he knows he deserves but hopes to avoid. But I am not exploding. I feel nothing. A strange hollow buzzing has filled my ears, drowning out the soft dinner music Sarah had put on. It's a wonderful place, Sarah chirps, lowering her phone for a moment, her performance complete. She picks up her wine glass, her red nails a startling slash of color against the delicate stem. They have water aerobics. A book club. You'll make so many friends, Olivia. She calls me Olivia. Not Mom or even Mrs. Henderson. Just Olivia. As if we were acquaintances, colleagues. It's a small thing, a tiny erosion of intimacy, but tonight it feels like a chasm opening between us. She takes a delicate sip of wine, her gaze flitting over me. She's assessing my reaction the way a scientist observes a specimen. She is looking for tears, for anger, for a satisfying scene. I will give her none of it. The brochure is still there. A tombstone on my plate. On the cover, a silver-haired couple laughs while playing shuffleboard on a lawn so green it looks artificial. Golden Meadows, your golden years redefined. Redefined? Is that what this is? My life, my home, my memories being redefined by my son and his wife in a single brutal transaction. The land. The sale of the land was the first betrayal. 200 acres of rolling hills and whispering creeks. Arthur, my Arthur, a geologist with hands as steady as the rocks he studied, had called it our sanctuary. He spent 40 years walking every inch of it, mapping the veins of quartz that ran beneath the soil, teaching me the names of the wildflowers that grew in the shade of the old oaks. We built our lives on that land. We raised Ethan on that land. We scattered Arthur's ashes under the great willow by the creek, so he could forever be part of the earth he loved. It's what Dad would have wanted, Ethan says, finally meeting my eyes. The lie is so audacious, so profane it almost makes me laugh. Arthur would have sooner set fire to the deed than let a corporation build a luxury resort over his life's work. Arthur saw the greed in Ethan long before I was willing to. He saw the way our son's eyes lit up not at the beauty of a sunset over the valley, but at the thought of its market value. "He has a hole in him, Liv," Arthur used to say, his voice sad. "And he'll throw everything we have into it, trying to fill it up." I never believed him. I couldn't. A mother cannot see a hole in her child. She sees only the child. My gaze drops back to my plate. The chicken is getting cold. The rosemary sprig has wilted. This was supposed to be the last supper in our home. A farewell to the past before they moved into a larger house with the proceeds from the sale. A house with a separate room for me they'd promised. A little guest suite with its own bathroom. Another lie. All of it a meticulously constructed deception. The conversations about paint colors for my new room. The questions about which of my old furniture I'd like to bring. It was all a performance to keep me docile until the ink on the contract was dry. And now the final act. "The rooms are lovely," Sarah continues, filling the silence I leave behind. "We picked one for you with a view of the garden. It gets the morning sun. A view of a manicured, sterile garden. Not my wild, unruly one. A patch of earth tended by strangers, planted with flowers chosen from a catalog. Not the rare lady's slipper orchids I cultivated for years. The morning sun, a thin filtered light through a double-paned window that probably doesn't even open. They are describing a cage, and they are calling it a kindness." I think of the day I signed the papers. My hand had trembled. Ethan had placed his own hand over mine, steadying it. "It's okay, Mom. We're in this together." His touch had felt warm, reassuring. Now I realize he wasn't steadying me. He was guiding the pen. He was a puppeteer, and I was his willing marionette. I feel a wave of nausea, hot and acidic. I had trusted him. After Arthur died, the loneliness was a physical presence, a cold shadow in every room of our house. Moving in with Ethan and Sarah felt like a lifeline. I sold our home, the home Arthur and I built, and I put the money into their lives. I paid off their mortgage. I helped them get a new car. I became a live-in nanny for my granddaughter Maya, a cook, a gardener. I thought I was contributing. I thought I was part of a family. I was just a resource, an asset to be managed and now to be liquidated. Ethan clears his throat. "We can start packing your things this weekend. We'll only take the essentials. Golden Meadows provides the rest. It's all included in the package we chose for you." The essentials. What are the essentials of a 72-year life? A few photo albums? A box of Arthur's books? My collection of pressed flowers? My life whittled down to what can fit in the back of their SUV. The rest, my history, the furniture that holds the imprint of our bodies, the scuff marks on the floor from a child's toy. All of it will be sold or thrown away. They aren't just moving me out. They are erasing me. Sarah's phone lights up again. A text message. She smiles at the screen, her thumbs flying across the keyboard. She is already sharing the news. It went so well. She's so relieved to be taken care of. The narrative is being cemented in real time. Olivia, the confused, grateful mother, safely delivered into the hands of her loving children. Any protest I make now will be framed as confusion, as senility, as the ungrateful ramblings of an old woman who doesn't know what's good for her. They have built the walls of my prison with words like love, and care, and safety. I finally look down and pick up the brochure. The paper is slick and cold. I open it. Photos of smiling, placid seniors. A schedule of activities: 10 a.m. chair yoga, 2 p.m. bingo, 4 p.m. social hour. It's a timetable for waiting to die. My eyes scan the fine print. The list of rules. The visiting hours. I am a botanist. I have spent my life studying things that grow wild and free, things that fight for sunlight and cling to life in the most inhospitable of places. And they want to put me in a terrarium. A single, cold thought cuts through the buzzing in my head. They think I am already dead. They look at my white hair, the lines on my face, the slight tremor in my hands, and they see a life that is over. They see a series of tasks to be managed. They see an estate to be settled. They do not see the woman who trekked through the Amazon to identify a new species of orchid. They do not see the woman who could name every tree on our land by its bark alone. They do not see the woman who loved a brilliant, kind man with a fierceness that still burns inside me like a pilot light. I close the brochure and place it deliberately on the table, next to my plate. I look at my son, truly look at him for the first time all evening. The boy I raised is gone. In his place is a stranger wearing his face, a man with cold, calculating eyes and a mouth that knows how to form the shape of loving words without feeling any of them. He sees me looking and offers a small, tight smile, the smile of a victor. Then he says the words that will echo in my mind for a long time to come. See, Mom? It's going to be fine. It's a relief, isn't it? To not have to worry anymore. And in that moment the numbness cracks. It is not relief I feel. It is the slow creeping chill of a plant that has just had its roots severed. They have taken my home, my legacy, and now my future. They have just sentenced me to a slow, beige death in a room with a view of a garden I did not plant. They have done this thinking I am a wilting flower, a relic to be put on a shelf. They have forgotten one crucial thing about the wild things I have spent my life studying. They are resilient. They are patient. And some of them, the most beautiful ones, are poisonous. They think this story is over. They have no idea it has just begun. My name is Olivia Reed. Before I was a widow, before I was a burden, I was a botanist. It wasn't just a profession. It was the language I used to understand the world. For 40 years, my world was a 200-acre expanse of pristine woodland in Willow Creek, Oregon. My husband, Arthur, a geologist, was the only other person who spoke that language with me. He understood the story told by a layer of sedimentary rock, and I understood the epic poem written in the rings of a Douglas fir. He called the land our cathedral. It was an apt description. The towering pines were our pillars, their needles whispering sermons on the wind. The forest floor, a mosaic of moss and fern, was our hallowed ground. In the spring the trillium bloomed like 1,000 small prayers. In the autumn, the golden leaves of the big-leaf maples were like stained glass lit from within. We lived in a small, sturdy house Arthur had helped design, with a wide porch where we'd sit in the evenings, watching the alpenglow paint the distant mountains. Our life wasn't loud, but it was profoundly deep. It was a life measured in seasons, in the return of the migratory birds, in the slow, patient growth of the forest we nurtured. Arthur would bring me stones, their surfaces cool and smooth, and tell me about the millions of years of pressure and time they held. In return, I would show him the secret life of the nurse logs, decaying giants that gave birth to new generations of hemlock and spruce. We were partners not just in marriage but in our reverence for the land. It was our sanctuary, our life's work, our legacy. Then 10 years ago Arthur died. A heart attack, swift and silent, took him while he was mapping a fault line near the creek. One moment he was the bedrock of my life, the next he was gone. The silence he left behind wasn't peaceful. It was a crushing, cavernous thing. The whispers of the pine trees now sounded like sighs of grief. The birdsong felt mocking. The house, once our shared haven, became an echo chamber for my loneliness. Every corner held a ghost of a memory. Arthur by the fireplace, his geology book spread around him. Arthur in the kitchen, humming off-key while he made coffee. Arthur on the porch, his hand resting over mine. The cathedral had lost its high priest, and I, a lone parishioner, found the space too vast, too holy, too empty to bear alone. And so, in the fog of my grief, I made my first mistake. A catastrophic, life-altering error born not of foolishness, but of a desperate need for connection. I sold our house, the one with the wide porch and the view of the mountains. I sold the cathedral. I moved in with my son Ethan and his wife Sarah. They lived in a sprawling suburban house 2 hours away. A world of manicured lawns and homeowners associations. Seemed like the logical thing to do. I would be near my only son, near my granddaughter Maya. I wouldn't be alone. To make things easier, to show them I wasn't coming as a dependent, I transferred the bulk of my life savings, the money from the sale of our home and Arthur's modest life insurance, into a joint account with Ethan. It will help with the mortgage, I'd said, imagining us as a single cohesive family unit. We're in this together. Ethan had hugged me, his embrace feeling a little too tight, a little too triumphant. Sarah had smiled, a brilliant, polished smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. I thought I was buying proximity to family, investing in a new chapter of shared lives and loving support. I see now, with the brutal clarity of hindsight, that I was actually just paying for my own cage. It wasn't the first time I'd poured my resources into Ethan's future, of course. A mother's love is a river that flows in one direction, and I never begrudged its course. I remember the day he graduated with his business degree, his face alight with ambition, but shadowed by the colossal weight of his student loans. He wanted to start his own real estate business, to be his own man. The banks wouldn't look at him. I didn't hesitate. I cashed out a portion of the retirement fund Arthur and I had so carefully built. The fund meant for our travels, for seeing the world's great botanical gardens. I paid off every last penny of his debt. "Now you can fly, my boy," I told him, and the pride in his eyes was all the return on investment I needed. I saw it as planting a seed. I was giving him fertile ground to grow his dreams. A few years later, that dream required a certain image. He needed a car, he explained, not just for transportation but a statement. A gleaming silver luxury sedan that would tell potential clients he was successful, that he could be trusted with their biggest investments. His credit was still too new, the dealership said. So I went with him. I sat in the sterile air-conditioned office, the smell of leather and aggressive air freshener thick in the air. I remember the salesman's patronizing smile as he slid the papers across the desk. I looked at Ethan, at the desperate hope in his face, and I picked up the pen. My signature, once used to label scientific specimens, was now underwriting my son's ambition. I did it all out of love. I did it because I believed that was what a mother does. You build the ramp so your children can reach for the stars. You don't ask what happens if they use that ramp to drive away from you. Now I live in their guest room. That's the polite term for it. It's a converted office at the back of the house, small and airless, with a single window that offers a stunning panoramic view of our neighbors' overflowing trash and recycling bins. The walls are a neutral beige, the color of apathy. My life, which once spanned 200 acres of living, breathing wilderness, is now contained within these four walls. My belongings are few. My botany texts, my husband's worn-out field guides, a framed photo of Arthur and me on our wedding day, his eyes crinkling at the corners. They feel like artifacts from another life, relics of a woman I no longer recognize. My existence here has been distilled into a series of quiet, unpaid duties. I am the de facto babysitter for my granddaughter Maya. I love her, of course, with a ferocity that aches, but I am no longer a grandmother who visits for story time and cookies. I am childcare. I am the one who picks her up from school, who helps with homework, who makes sure she eats something other than processed snacks. I am the buffer when her parents are too busy or too tired to deal with the turbulent emotions of a teenager. My days are structured around her schedule, not my own. Then there is the laundry. I am the keeper of the family's clothes. I can trace their lives through the contents of the hamper. Ethan's crisp business shirts, smelling faintly of cologne and stress. Sarah's expensive yoga pants, worn for coffee runs, not exercise. Maya's hoodies, smelling of teenage angst and whatever perfume is popular this month. I wash, I dry, I fold. It is an endless, thankless cycle. A constant tidying up of their lives while my own unravels. And then there is the garden. Out back, there is a small, meticulously planned patch of green. Sarah designed it from a magazine. It has structured hedges, fashionable ornamental grasses, and seasonal flowers that provide a pop of color. She calls it her Zen garden, but its only purpose is to serve as a backdrop for her social media posts. She'll pose there with a glass of wine, a book she isn't reading, and a caption about finding peace. I am the one who tends it. I, who once managed an entire ecosystem, now spend my afternoons on my knees, pulling weeds from between paving stones. I prune her roses with a botanist's precision. I know the soil's pH by heart. I know which plants need more sun and which need less. My knowledge, my life's passion, has been reduced to maintaining a prop for my daughter-in-law's online performance of a perfect life. They don't see the irony. They don't see me at all. I am a utility, as essential and as invisible as the plumbing or the electricity. I am the quiet hum in the background of their lives, a resource to be used until it runs dry. I am a fixture, not a person. The abuse wasn't a sudden storm, it was a change in the climate. It began with the little things, the atmospheric shifts you feel in your bones before you can name them. After the initial hollow grief of leaving my home, of folding my life into a single room off their living room, a new kind of cold began to seep in. It started at the dinner table. The heavy oak table, the one I'd bought for them as a housewarming gift years ago, had 6 chairs. There was one for Ethan, one for Sarah, 2 for my grandchildren Maya and Leo, and 2 for guests. I was never considered a guest. My place was a small, folding stool brought in from the garage, placed at the corner of the table, slightly apart from the warm circle of family. I was present but not included. First, I told myself it was practical. The dining room was a bit cramped. But then I noticed how Sarah would serve dinner. She'd heap food onto Ethan's plate first, then the children's, then her own. She would look at the remaining portions in the serving dishes, a flicker of calculation in her eyes, before spooning a modest, almost grudging amount onto my plate. Sometimes, if Leo had been particularly fussy, she would just push the remnants of his plate toward me. "He barely touched it," she'd say, not looking at me. "It's a shame to waste it." I would eat the cold, rejected macaroni, the silence in my throat thick as the cheese congealing on the plate. My cup was different too. They all drank from heavy glass tumblers. I was given a brightly colored plastic cup, the kind left over from Leo's 4th birthday party. "Easier for you to hold, Olivia," Sarah had said once, with a smile that never reached her eyes. "We wouldn't want any accidents." The implication hung in the air. You are old, you are clumsy, you are a child. The days developed a rhythm of quiet degradation. In the mornings, I'd wake to the sound of the family getting ready for their day. I would make my way to the kitchen, my joints aching, intending to make a cup of tea. But Sarah was always there first, a whirlwind of controlled chaos. "Oh, you're up," she'd say, her back to me as she packed lunchboxes. Her voice was always a little too bright, a little too tight. If I reached for the kettle, her hand would get there first. "Let me, Olivia. You'll just be in the way." I would retreat to my corner, my stool, and wait for a cup to be handed to me, usually lukewarm, the tea bag left in for far too long, staining the water a bitter brown. My existence was measured in the space I was allowed to occupy, and that space was constantly shrinking. My favorite armchair in the living room, the one with the good lumbar support Arthur had insisted on, was suddenly occupied by a tower of Sarah's interior design magazines. When I asked about it, she waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, I'm just reorganizing. You don't mind sitting on the couch, do you?" The couch was low and deep, a nightmare for my hips to get out of. I felt like a beetle trapped on its back whenever I sat on it. Eventually, I just stopped going into the living room in the evenings. I would hear them laughing at a movie, the sound muffled through my door, and I would sit on the edge of my bed, the silence of my room a physical weight. The cruelty was in the language, the subtle barbs wrapped in feigned concern. I had been a botanist for 40 years. My garden at the old house had been my sanctuary, a living library of plants I had nurtured from seed. I tried to bring some of that life to their sterile backyard, planting a small herb garden in a patch of sun near the kitchen. One afternoon, I heard Sarah talking to Maya as they stood by the window. "Look, honey," she said in a stage whisper loud enough for me to hear. "Grandma's playing in the dirt again. That's what old people do. They just like to mess with weeds. My herbs. My beautiful, fragrant rosemary and thyme." She called them weeds. I felt my hands, caked in the rich soil, suddenly burn with shame. Then there was the smell. It was Sarah's most potent, most insidious weapon. I've always been meticulous about my hygiene, a habit from years of working in labs and greenhouses. But one day I walked into the kitchen and Sarah, who was talking on the phone, stopped mid-sentence. She wrinkled her nose, a theatrical gesture of disgust. "Hold on, Brenda," she said into the phone, then walked over to the window and threw it open, even though it was a chilly autumn day. She took a can of air freshener from under the sink and sprayed it vigorously around the room, the cloying artificial scent of linen fresh, stinging my nostrils. She never said a word to me. She didn't have to. The message was clear. I was the source of the unpleasantness. I was the contamination in her pristine home. After that, I started smelling it everywhere, the old person smell she'd invented. I would sniff my own cardigans, bury my face in my pillow, terrified that I carried some invisible taint, some odor of decay that announced my uselessness to the world. Ethan, my son, was a different kind of tormentor. He was a master of the slow erosion of my identity. He never raised his voice, not then. His weapon was condescension. If I tried to join a conversation about current events, he would cut me off with a patient, weary sigh. Mom, we've discussed this. The world has changed. Your ideas are there from a different time. He said it as if he were explaining a complex equation to a child, his tone dripping with a pity that was more insulting than any anger. He was erasing my mind, my experiences, my 4 decades of professional knowledge and my 7 decades of life, dismissing it all as outdated. I was no longer Olivia, the respected botanist, the wife, the mother. I was just Mom, a relic to be tolerated. The control tightened. It started with my finances. After I'd moved in, I'd foolishly, trustingly, put the last of my savings into their joint account to help them with their overwhelming mortgage. It was a gift, I thought, a way to contribute. But it became a leash. They began to manage my finances for me. My pension was deposited directly into their account. Once a week, Ethan would sit me down at the kitchen table, a ledger book open in front of him. Okay, Mom. Let's go over your expenses. He would hand me a $50 bill. This should be plenty for the week, right? You don't really go anywhere. It was an allowance. I, a 72-year-old woman who had managed her own household and finances for 50 years, was being given pocket money like a teenager. If I wanted to buy a birthday card for a friend or a new pair of gardening gloves, I had to ask for permission, to justify the expense, and endure the long-suffering sigh that meant I was being a burden. My mail, my last connection to the outside world, was no longer private. I'd come downstairs to find letters from my sister or my old university alumni association already opened, lying on the kitchen counter for anyone to read. Oh, I thought it might be a bill, Sarah would say breezily if I questioned it. Just trying to be helpful. But it wasn't helpful. It was a violation. It was another way of saying, nothing you have is truly yours. Your thoughts, your connections, your past. It all belongs to us now. We have the right to inspect it. I was a ghost in my own life, a silent spectator to my own slow erasure, a problem to be managed until finally I disappeared. The days bled into one another, each a fresh paper cut on the same wound, each one stinging more than the last. I learned to be quiet, to be small, to take up as little space as possible. I thought that if I could just make myself invisible enough, the cuts would stop. I was wrong. The cruelty was not a byproduct of my presence. It was the point. And soon they would demand more than just my silence and my savings. They would come for the last piece of my soul, the last thing Arthur had left me. The shift happened about 6 months after I'd moved in. The subtle cruelties began to coalesce, to harden into a single terrifying purpose. Ethan came to me one evening. I was in my room, reading one of Arthur's old geology textbooks, the familiar weight of it a small comfort. He knocked softly on the door, a courtesy he rarely extended anymore. When I opened it, his face was a mask of strained sincerity, a look I hadn't seen since he was a teenager trying to borrow the car after he'd been grounded. Mom, can we talk? He asked, his voice low and earnest. He didn't wait for an answer, just walked past me and sat on the edge of my bed, making the small space feel even smaller. I remained standing by the door, my hand still on the knob, a strange protective instinct kicking in. What is it, Ethan? He took a deep breath, like an actor preparing for a difficult scene. Mom, I've been presented with an opportunity, a life-changing opportunity, for all of us. He spread his hands, a gesture of magnanimous offering. You know how hard Sarah and I have been working, how much we're struggling with the mortgage, with saving for Maya's college fund. I knew because my life savings had been swallowed by that struggle. I said nothing. A developer, he continued, his eyes gleaming with a feverish light. A big one. Sterling Corporation. They want to buy the land. The full 200 acres. The air left my lungs. The land. Arthur's land. It wasn't just dirt and trees to me. It was a living monument. It was the place where Arthur and I had built our life, where he had taught me the names of the rocks and I had taught him the names of the wildflowers. It was where his presence still felt so strong I could almost turn and see him cresting the hill, his rock hammer in hand. They want to build a luxury eco-resort, Ethan said, the words tasting like poison in my mouth. It's tasteful, Mom. Ian. It'll bring jobs, revenue. It's the future. He looked at me, his expression pleading. This is it. This is our big break. It would solve all our problems. We could pay off the house, set up trust funds for the kids. We could take care of you properly. Get you into a really nice place where you'd have professional care. The last part was delivered so casually, yet it landed like a stone in my stomach. A really nice place. He meant a nursing home. He was selling my husband's legacy to pay for my cage. My voice when it came was thin but steady. No. Ethan blinked, the charming mask flickering. What? Mom, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, I said, my grip tightening on the doorknob. That land is not for sale. It was Arthur's. It's my home. This is your home now. He gestured around my tiny, cramped room. The insult was so profound it almost made me laugh. No, Ethan. That land is where your father's ashes are scattered. They are part of the soil, under the ancient oak at the center of the meadow. You want me to sell that? So strangers can play golf over his remains. His desperation began to curdle, the earnestness souring into impatience. It's not about that. It's about the living. It's about your family, the one that's right here suffering, while you cling to some sentimental nonsense. It's not nonsense, I whispered. It's his legacy. It's all I have left of him. That was when the mask didn't just flicker, it shattered. The years of resentment, the perceived burden of my existence in his house, the bottomless pit of his own ambition, it all came pouring out. His face twisted into a snarl of pure rage, a visage I had never seen on my son before. He shot to his feet, his body suddenly menacing in the small room. A dead man's memory, he screamed, his voice cracking. That's what you care about? A dead man's memory. What about your living family? What about me? What about your granddaughter who might not be able to go to college because her grandmother is too damn stubborn to let go of a pile of dirt? He was breathing heavily, his fists clenched at his sides. The veins in his neck stood out. I took a step back, my back hitting the door. You are a selfish old woman, he spat, each word a venomous dart. Clinging to a dead man's memory while your living family suffers. You sit here in my house eating my food, and you have the nerve to stand in the way of our future. The silence that followed was terrifying. It was filled with the ugly truth of how he saw me, not as his mother but as an obstacle, an inconvenience, a selfish old woman. He stared at me for a long moment, his chest heaving. Then, a chilling calmness settled over his features. The rage was gone, replaced by something far colder, far more frightening. A look of finality, of decision. He looked at me as if I were no longer a person to be persuaded, but an object to be moved. He turned and walked out of the room, not even bothering to close the door behind him. I stood there, shaking, the echo of his words ringing in my ears. Selfish. Old. Woman. That was the night I understood. That was the night the 1,000 cuts became a declaration of war. That was the night he decided I no longer had a choice in the matter. And I knew with a certainty that chilled me to my very core, that he would do whatever it took to get what he wanted. The silence in the house had changed. It was no longer the peaceful quiet of a home at rest, but the taut, humming silence of a wire stretched to its breaking point. It began subtly, a shift in the air, a texture I could feel on my skin. It started in Ethan's study. His door, usually ajar, was now always closed. I would walk past and hear nothing, which was somehow more unnerving than hearing hushed voices. Then I saw my pen. It wasn't just any pen. It was a sterling silver Montblanc, a 25th anniversary gift from Arthur. Its weight was familiar in my hand, its nib shaped by decades of my handwriting, from lecture notes on bryophytes to love letters left on his pillow. It lived in a velvet-lined box on my writing desk. But there it was, lying uncapped on Ethan's mahogany desk, a foreign object in his world of spreadsheets and aggressive marketing plans. Picked it up. The silver was smudged with his fingerprints, but that wasn't what made my breath catch. The nib, my beautiful fine-tipped nib, was stained. A greasy cheap black ink, viscous and ugly, clung to it. Not the Waterman Serenity blue I had used exclusively for 30 years. That blue was the color of a twilight sky, the color of Arthur's eyes on a good day. This black was the color of a dead thing. My hand trembled as I set it down. On his desk blotter I could see them. Faint looping impressions. The curve of an O, the sharp downstroke of an L. The distinctive flourish of my... He wasn't writing letters. He was practicing. He was practicing me. A cold dread, heavy and metallic, settled in the pit of my stomach. Why would he need to practice my signature? The answer was a thought so monstrous I couldn't let it form completely. Not my son. Not Ethan. I told myself I was being paranoid. A lonely old woman seeing ghosts in the shadows. I placed the pen back in its box, cleaned the nib until it shone, and filled it with my proper blue ink, as if restoring order to this small object could restore order to my world. But the wire of silence kept stretching. A few days later, Sarah was scrolling through her phone at the kitchen island, a self-satisfied little smile on her face. She was a woman who wore her contentment like a weapon. "The drone shots came out beautifully," she announced to Ethan, who was pouring coffee. "Marcus really captured the scale of the property." Property? My property? Willow Creek was not a property. It was a sanctuary. It was 40 years of my life. It was where Arthur's ashes had mingled with the soil beneath the great oak. "Let me see," Ethan said, leaning over her shoulder. My heart began a slow, heavy drumbeat against my ribs. I busied myself at the sink, my back to them, my ears straining. "Look at that," Ethan murmured, his voice thick with a greedy pride I knew all too well. "Sterling is going to love this. Prime for development." Sterling. I knew that name. Sterling Corporation. The developers who had been sniffing around for years. The ones who saw my 200 acres of protected wetland and old-growth forest as a blank canvas for a golf course and luxury condos. The ones I had told Ethan in no uncertain terms to send packing. I heard the distinctive tap of Sarah emailing a photo. I waited until they had left the kitchen, their laughter echoing from the hallway, a sound that suddenly seemed hollow and cruel. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my own phone. I opened Sarah's Instagram feed, a place I rarely visited, a garish world of filtered sunsets and designer handbags. And there it was, the most recent post. A photograph taken from high above, the world flattened and unfamiliar. My land. My beautiful sprawling wild land seen from a god's eye view. The creek was a silver ribbon, the woods a deep textured green. But in the center of the main pasture, the place where Arthur and I used to watch the meteor showers, was a wound. A stark white rectangle with bold black letters. A sign. I zoomed in, my thumb unsteady on the screen, my blood turning to ice water in my veins. The letters were sharp, brutal and absolute. SOLD. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I felt a strange, terrifying calm wash over me. The kind of calm that comes when the worst thing you can imagine has just happened. The wire hadn't just been stretched. It had snapped. I had never signed a thing. I had never spoken to Sterling Corporation. But there it was for all the world to see. A sold sign hammered into the heart of my life, posted on social media like a trophy. They hadn't just gone behind my back. They had celebrated it. The confrontation didn't happen in a storm of shouting. It was worse. It was quiet. I waited until that evening after dinner, when the dishwasher was humming and the pretense of family life was at its thickest. I walked into the living room, holding my phone with Sarah's post displayed on the screen. I set it down on the coffee table between them. "I think," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the seismic terror I felt, "you have something to explain." Ethan and Sarah exchanged a look. It wasn't a look of guilt or surprise. It was something practiced, something rehearsed. It was a look of profound, theatrical pity. The kind of look one gives a beloved pet that has finally lost its mind. "Mom," Ethan began, his voice oozing a syrupy concern that turned my stomach. "What's this about? You look upset." "The sign, Ethan," I said, pointing a trembling finger at the phone. "The sign on my land that says sold." Sarah sighed, a long-suffering performative sound. Oh, Olivia. We were hoping to talk to you about this when you were clearer. Clearer. The word was a slap. I am perfectly clear. I did not sell the land. Ethan leaned forward, placing his hand over mine. His touch felt like a spider. Mom, you did. Don't you remember? We had the meeting with the lawyers a few weeks ago. You were so happy about it. You said you were relieved to finally be free of the burden. The lie was so audacious, so complete, it was almost brilliant. They were building a new reality around me, brick by insidious brick. They weren't just saying I'd sold the land, they were saying I'd been glad to do it. I have never, I said, pulling my hand away, in my life referred to Willow Creek as a burden. I want to see the paperwork. Ethan's eyes hardened for a fraction of a second before the mask of gentle concern slipped back into place. Of course. We want you to feel secure. In fact, our lawyer, Mr. Vance, was planning to drop by tomorrow to finalize some details. We can ask him to bring the sales agreement. The next day, Mr. Vance arrived. He wasn't a man. He was a suit filled with ambition and capped with a predatory smile. He moved with the fluid, unnerving grace of a shark. He sat on my sofa in my living room and spread a sheaf of papers on the coffee table. Olivia, he said, his voice a soothing, deep baritone designed to placate and disarm. Ethan and Sarah told me you were feeling a little confused. It's perfectly understandable. These things can be overwhelming. He slid a document across the table. The official seal of a notary was stamped in the corner. The letterhead was from Sterling Corporation. And at the bottom of the last page there it was. My signature. Olivia and Caldwell. It was perfect. The loop on the O, the slight lift of the L's, the unique way I cross my T. It was a flawless imitation. A work of art forged in betrayal. I didn't sign this, I whispered, the words catching in my throat. Mr. Vance's smile didn't waver. It was cemented in place. The notary public, a Ms. Albright, would disagree. She witnessed you signing it right here in this room. Ethan and Sarah were present as well. We have her sworn affidavit. I have never met a Ms. Albright. My voice rose, a thin, reedy sound that even to my own ears sounded hysterical. It was exactly what they wanted. Olivia, Mr. Vance said, his tone shifting to one of clinical patience, the kind a doctor uses for a delusional patient. Sometimes as we age, our memory plays tricks on us. It's not uncommon to have gaps, to forget significant events. We call it confabulation, where the mind creates false memories to fill in those gaps. It can feel very, very real. They were doing it. They were actively, methodically erasing me. They were painting me as a doddering old fool, a woman whose own mind had betrayed her. They were trying to erase my reality before they erased my legacy. I looked at Ethan, my son, the boy I had held in my arms, and saw a stranger looking back at me, his eyes cool and assessing. He wasn't just stealing my land. He was stealing my sanity. I fought. I called my old family lawyer, but he had retired. I tried to find another, but without any proof beyond my word against a notarized document, no one would take the case seriously. It's a domestic dispute, they'd say. Perhaps you should speak with your family. My family. The word was ash in my mouth. I was trapped. Every protest I made, every denial I issued, only added another brick to the wall of their narrative. Poor senile Olivia, lost in her own confusion. Then Ethan played his masterstroke. His trump card. Her name was Maya. My granddaughter. My beautiful, bright 16-year-old Maya. She was the one pure thing left in this house, the only person whose eyes didn't hold a hint of calculation when they looked at me. She was my ally, my confidant, the keeper of my stories about Arthur and the land. Ethan knew this, and he decided to poison it. He staged his scene in the kitchen one afternoon when he knew I was in the next room listening. I heard him call Maya in, his voice thick with a fabricated despair. Honey, can we talk for a minute? It's about Grandma. I held my breath, my hand clutching the doorframe. I heard the scrape of a chair as Maya sat down. Is she okay? She seems sad. She's more than sad, sweetie. She's unwell, Ethan said, his voice breaking artfully. Her mind, it's not what it used to be. She's forgetting things. Important things. And she's getting paranoid. What do you mean? Maya's voice was small, worried. She's trying to undo the sale of the Willow Creek property, Ethan said, letting out a long, ragged sigh. The deal that's going to pay for your college education. The deal that's going to finally get us out of debt and secure our future. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. I could picture him, head in his hands, shoulders slumped, playing the part of the burdened son. She doesn't understand, he continued, his voice now a desperate whisper. She thinks we're trying to hurt her. She's making these accusations, and if she succeeds, if she scares the buyers away, Maya, I don't know what we'll do. Everything will be gone. Your college fund, the house, everything we've worked for. It was a symphony of manipulation. He was weaving a narrative of my selfishness, my madness, directly against her future. He was forcing her to choose. But she loves that land, Maya said, a note of confusion in her voice. She did, Ethan corrected gently. But she also loved you more. The old grandma did. The one who was still with us. She would never have wanted her stubbornness to ruin your life. I'm so sorry you have to be put in the middle of this, honey. I'm so sorry. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. A few minutes later, Maya walked out of the kitchen. She saw me standing in the doorway. She looked at me, and the open, loving warmth that had always been there was gone. In its place was a cloud of confusion, hurt, and a dawning, terrible resentment. She didn't say a word. She just walked past me, up the stairs to her room, and closed the door. The sound of that click was the sound of my last anchor being cut. I was completely alone. They had taken my property, they had taken my credibility, and now they had taken the one person I had left. I was adrift in a sea of my son's lies, and the shore was nowhere in sight. That night I couldn't sleep. The house felt like a tomb. I was frantic, desperate for something tangible, something real in this world of smoke and mirrors. The original deed. I had to find the original deed to the land. Arthur had kept all our important documents in his study, a room I had kept exactly as he left it. At 2 a.m, with the house silent around me, I crept into the study. The air was still, thick with the scent of old paper, leather, and Arthur. I ran my hand over his desk, his geological maps, his collection of rocks and minerals. I opened the heavy drawers of his filing cabinet, my fingers searching for the familiar stiffness of the deeds folder. It wasn't there. I searched everywhere. In his desk, in the bookshelf, behind the framed photographs. Nothing. My panic began to rise again, a choking tide. Had Ethan taken that too? Defeated, I slumped into his old leather armchair. My eyes scanned the shelves, a lifetime of knowledge packed into spines. Textbooks on sedimentology, treatises on plate tectonics. My gaze fell on a row of unassuming, leather-bound books at the very back of a high shelf, partially hidden by a larger volume on mineralogy. They weren't textbooks. They were journals. Arthur's private journals. He had kept them for years, but I had never read them, respecting his privacy even after he was gone. Driven by a desperation I couldn't name, I pulled a small stepladder over and reached for them. They were heavy, filled with his dense, precise script. I took one down, then another, until I held a stack of 10 volumes in my arms. I sat down at his desk, opened the first one, and began to read. I expected to find sentiment. Musings on our life together, notes about his work, perhaps a few private thoughts on aging. I found strategy. I found a chillingly clear-eyed chronicle of his son's character. Arthur had seen it all. From the very beginning. The entries were meticulous, dated, and devoid of emotion, like a geologist's field notes. October 17, 1996. Ethan is 15. He claimed a classmate stole his watch. I found it hidden in his own closet. When confronted, he constructed an elaborate lie about trying to protect the other boy from suspicion. The lie was instant, complex, and delivered with absolute sincerity. He feels no guilt. His only emotion is anger at being discovered. March 22, 2004. Ethan called from college. Needs money for a textbook emergency. A check of the bank statement shows 3 large withdrawals from an ATM near a casino in Atlantic City. He does not know I can see this. When I questioned him, he feigned outrage at my lack of trust. The manipulation is becoming more sophisticated. He uses emotion as a tool, a lever. June 5, 2012. He and Sarah announced their engagement. She looks at him with adoration. She does not see or does not want to see the bottomless well of his entitlement. He talks about our future, but the word is a currency he uses to purchase the present. He sees other people not as individuals but as resources. I read for hours, page after page, year after year. It was a father's secret heartbreak, a detailed psychological profile written with love, but without illusion. Arthur had loved his son, but he had not been blind to him. He saw the rot, the fundamental emptiness where empathy should have been. And reading it, I felt a strange sense of validation. I wasn't going crazy. The man I saw in my son was real. Arthur had seen him too. He had been documenting it for 30 years. I finally reached the last journal, the one he had been writing in during the final year of his life. The handwriting was a little less steady, but the mind behind it was as sharp as ever. I turned to the final entry dated just 2 weeks before he died. My heart pounded as I read the words he had left for me. A message from beyond the grave. Olivia, my love. If you are reading this, it means the thing I have long feared has come to pass. Ethan has made his move for the land. I know you feel alone, and I am sorry I am not there to stand with you, but I am not leaving you defenseless. My breath hitched. I read on. Our son is a gifted liar, but he is also arrogant. He will focus on the obvious, the signature, the deed, your state of mind. He will not look deeper. He does not understand the land, not the way we do. He sees only its surface value. That will be his undoing. My will contains a clause, a poison pill. I had our lawyer, Mr. Davies, draft years ago. You may not even remember it. I framed it in dense legal language designed to be overlooked. It states that the surface rights to the Willow Creek property cannot be sold, transferred, or leased independently of the subterranean mineral rights. Mineral rights? Arthur had always been fascinated by the geology of our land, but I'd never thought of it in terms of commercial value. And here is the lock on the cage, my love. Those mineral rights are not held by me, or by my estate. They are held in a digital cryptographic trust, dormant and untouchable. The trust can only be dissolved and the rights released with a single passphrase. And Ethan will never find it. He will look for birthdays, anniversaries, pets' names. He will think in simple terms. But the key is not in our past. It is in the land itself. The passphrase is not a word. It is a sequence. The Linnean binomial nomenclature for the 3 rarest, most inconspicuous flowering plants on our property, in the order they bloom each spring. A code only a botanist could decipher. A code only you would know. My hands flew to my mouth. A wave of dizziness washed over me. I could see them in my mind's eye instantly. The delicate, ghost white Indian pipe, Monotropa uniflora, that pushes through the damp leaf litter in late May. The shy, nodding pink lady's slipper, Cypripedium McCall, hidden in the shade of the pine grove in early June. And the rarest of all, the tiny, spiraling nodding lady's tresses orchid, Spiranthes cernua, that blooms in the marshy soil by the creek in late August, almost invisible unless you know exactly where to look. Monotropa uniflora, Cypripedium McCall, Spiranthes cernua. It was genius. It was pure Arthur. A lock forged from love, knowledge, and a profound understanding of his son's blindness. Ethan had walked that land 1,000 times and had never truly seen it. To him it was just dirt and trees. To us it was a living library. The land wasn't just land. It was a test. It was a fortress. And Arthur had just given me the key. I closed the journal, my heart no longer filled with despair, but with a cold, clear, crystalline rage. Ethan thought he was rewriting my reality. He thought he had erased me. But he had forgotten who I was. He had forgotten whose wife I had been. He had made a fatal error. He had underestimated the botanist. He had underestimated the earth beneath his feet. And the earth, as Arthur well knew, keeps its own records. The earth does not forget. And it was about to speak. I become the woman they want me to be. The transition is seamless, a shedding of one skin for another. I let my shoulders slump just a fraction. I allow a slight tremor to enter my hands when I reach for the salt at the dinner table. I let my gaze drift to seem unfocused, as if my thoughts are a tangled skein of yarn I can no longer unravel. I become frail, confused, defeated, a ghost at my own son's table. The performance begins the morning after I close Arthur's journals. The scent of burned toast hangs in the air, a testament to Sarah's hurried, impatient cooking. She places a plate in front of me with a clatter, not looking at me. Eat up, Olivia. We have a lot to talk about today. Her voice is bright, but it's the false brightness of a freshly painted cage. Ethan sits opposite me, scrolling through his phone, a small, self-satisfied smile playing on his lips. He looks up, his eyes skimming over me as if I'm a piece of furniture he's already mentally discarded. Mom, Sarah and I were looking at the brochure for Golden Meadows again last night. They have a fantastic activities schedule. Water aerobics, bingo, even a little book club. You'd like that, wouldn't you? I look down at my toast at the black bitter edges. I take a small slow bite. I chew deliberately as if the effort is monumental. I swallow then look up, letting a veil of confusion cloud my eyes. Golden Meadows? I ask, my voice a soft, wavering thing. Is that a garden center? Sarah lets out a little sigh, a sound of theatrical patience. She reaches across the table and pats my hand. Her touch is cold, her nails perfectly manicured. No, sweetie. It's your new home. Remember? We talked about it. The lovely place where you'll be safe and have lots of friends your own age. My home is here. I say, the words thin and reedy. Ethan puts his phone down with a thud. Mom, we've been over this. This house is too much for you. It's too much for us having to worry about you all the time. This is what's best. It's a wonderful place. We picked out a room for you with a view of the rose garden. A view of a manicured, tame, predictable garden. A plot of earth measured and constrained, just as they wish me to be. I think of my 200 acres, of the wild, untamable beauty of Arthur's land. The land that holds his ashes. The land that holds his secrets. I nod meekly. I look from Ethan to Sarah, my gaze watery, my lower lip trembling just so. A rose garden. I repeat, as if the concept is a distant, pleasant memory. That sounds nice. Their relief is palpable. It washes over the breakfast table, clearing the air of tension like a fresh breeze. They are so drunk on their victory, so sure of their power. They exchange a look, a quick, triumphant glance that they think I don't see. But I see everything. Their condescension is now my camouflage. Their pity is my shield. They don't see the gears turning behind my vacant eyes. They don't see the cold, hard resolve solidifying in my gut like a block of granite. Over the next few days, I embrace the role. I let them see me packing boxes in the living room, my movements slow, my hands trembling as I wrap old porcelain figurines in newspaper. I accidentally drop a small vase, a wedding gift from decades ago. It shatters on the floor. Sarah rushes in, sighing dramatically. Oh, for heaven's sake, Olivia. Just leave it. I'll do it. You'll end up breaking everything. She kneels, sweeping the pieces into a dustpan with brisk, irritated movements. I stand there looking helpless. I'm sorry, I whisper. My hands, they don't work so well anymore. We know, Mom, Ethan says, walking in and putting a hand on my arm, guiding me to a chair. That's why you're going to Golden Meadows. So people can take care of you. His voice is syrupy with false concern. It's the voice he uses when he wants something. I've heard it my whole life. Only now, I understand its true timbre. It's the sound of greed. They discuss the logistics of the move over my head, as if I'm not even in the room. They talk about selling my remaining furniture, about what to do with my books, my precious botany texts and Arthur's geology collection. We can just donate them, Sarah says dismissively. They're just old, dusty books. Each word is a small paper cut. But I don't flinch. I sit in the armchair, my hands folded in my lap, and I watch. I listen. I absorb their casual cruelty, their utter disregard for my life and my history. and I file it all away. Every dismissive glance, every patronizing word, becomes another stone in the foundation of my revenge. They think they are writing the final chapter of my life. They have no idea I am just beginning to write theirs. My chance comes a few evenings later. Maya is doing her homework at the kitchen island, her brow furrowed in concentration. Ethan and Sarah are out for dinner. A celebration, they'd called it. Celebrating my impending eviction. The house is quiet except for the scratching of Maya's pen and the hum of the refrigerator. I shuffle into the kitchen, leaning heavily on the counter. Maya dear, I begin, my voice soft. She looks up, a flicker of something in her eyes, pity, maybe a hint of guilt. It's the crack I've been looking for. Hi Grandma. Do you need something? It's just all this talk of moving. I worry I'll lose touch with my old friends. My phone, it's so complicated. All these apps and things. I wave a hand vaguely, feigning technological incompetence. And it's on Ethan's plan. I don't want to be a bother. I let the sentence hang in the air. Maya puts her pen down. What do you mean, Grandma? Well, I sigh, looking down at my worn slippers. I was thinking, I see the young people with those simple phones. The ones you just use for talking. And maybe for that game with the letters? Words with Friends? My friend Martha loves that game. Maya's expression softens. This is familiar territory for her generation. The technologically inept grandparent. You mean like a prepaid phone? A burner? I look up, my eyes wide with manufactured innocence. Is that what they're called? Yes, a burner phone. Sounds so simple. I wouldn't need the internet or anything. Just something I could use to call Martha. So I don't run up Ethan's bill. I reach into the pocket of my housecoat and pull out a crumpled wad of bills, the allowance they give me from my own money. I've saved up. Could you perhaps pick one up for me? I wouldn't know where to look. You can get one with cash, can't you? So it's no trouble to anyone. The logic is perfect. It's the plea of an old woman trying to maintain a sliver of independence without being a burden. It appeals to her teenage sense of superiority and her underlying guilt. She sees a chance to do something kind for her poor, confused grandmother. Of course, Grandma, she says, her voice gentle. It's no problem. I can go to the drugstore tomorrow after school. Oh, thank you, dear. I say, my voice thick with emotion. I reach out and pat her arm. You're such a good girl. Don't tell your father. I want it to be our little secret. A surprise. She nods, a small smile on her face. Our secret, Grandma. The next day, she presents me with a small box containing a cheap, plastic phone and a top-up card. I thank her profusely, fumbling with the packaging like a child with a new toy. That night, when the house is dark and silent, I lock myself in the bathroom. The little phone feels alien in my hand, a cold, hard piece of my new reality. My fingers, which they believe to be weak and trembling, are steady as I dial the number. I haven't called it in over a year, but I know it by heart. The phone rings twice before a calm, familiar voice answers. Davies. Mr. Davies. I say, my voice a whisper. It's Olivia Wallace, Arthur's wife. There's a pause on the other end. I can hear the surprise in the silence. Olivia. My goodness. It's been a long time. Is everything all right? Tears I didn't know I was holding back spring to my eyes. The cold facade I've maintained for days cracks under the weight of his simple, decent question. No, Robert. I say, my voice breaking. Nothing is all right. I need your help. My son is trying to steal everything. I tell him everything. I start with the dinner, the announcement of Golden Meadows, the forged signature, the legal gaslighting. I tell him about Arthur's journals, about the land, the mineral rights, and the trust. I speak in a low, urgent torrent of words, huddled on the cold tile floor of the bathroom, the small phone pressed tight against my ear. Robert Davies listens without interruption. He was Arthur's lawyer, but he was also his friend. They were men of a similar cut. Quiet, meticulous, and possessing an unshakable integrity. When I finish, the silence on the line is heavy with disbelief and anger. The boy always had a greedy streak, he finally says, his voice grim. But this is monstrous. He takes a deep breath. Arthur was a brilliant man, Olivia. He was always 10 steps ahead. If he set up a poison pill, you can be sure it's a potent one. This digital trust, this password, it's the key. He said only I would know it, I whisper. A sequence of botanical names. The rarest flowers on the property. Then that's where we start, Davies says, his voice now firm, professional. The strategist waking up. You need to get me a copy of that trust document. And you need to find those flowers. Can you do that without raising suspicion? I think so, I say, a new strength flowing through me. They think I'm losing my mind. They encourage me to take walks. For the fresh air. Good, he says. Use it. Become the frail old woman they want you to be. And while you're at it, document everything. Dates, times, conversations. Anything you can remember. We're going to build a case, Olivia. We're going to bring him down. When I hang up, the bathroom no longer feels like a prison. Feels like a command center. I look at my reflection in the mirror. The lines on my face, which yesterday seemed like marks of decay, now look like a map of survival. The weariness in my eyes is gone, replaced by a cold, clear light. The game has begun. My evening walks become my mission. Ethan and Sarah watch me from the kitchen window as I shuffle out the back door, a shawl wrapped around my thin shoulders. They see a sad, defeated old woman aimlessly wandering the grounds of her former life. They don't see the purpose in my stride, the focus in my eyes. In my pocket, I carry a small, worn notebook, one of Arthur's old field journals, and a pen. I told them I wanted to sketch the birds. They smiled their condescending smiles and patted my head. The land welcomes me. It's late spring and the earth is teeming with life. I walk past the familiar oaks and maples, my feet finding the old paths Arthur and I carved through the woods over 40 years. But I'm not here for the familiar. I'm hunting for the rare, the unseen. Arthur's notes are my guide. He didn't just write about geology. His love for this land extended to every leaf and petal. His handwriting, a precise, angular script, describes the exact conditions, the specific microclimates where his favorite botanical treasures could be found. The ghost orchid, Dendrophylax lindinii, one entry reads, prefers the humid bark of the pond apple trees down in the swampy hollow. It blooms under a new moon in June, a pale specter in the gloom. I make my way down to the hollow, the air growing thick and damp. The ground softens under my feet. And there, clinging to the side of a gnarled tree, I find it. Its leafless stem, its spectral white flower suspended in the air like a tiny floating ghost. A thrill, cold and sharp, runs through me. This isn't just a flower. It's the first key. I write its Latin name in my little notebook. Dendrophylax lindinii. Days turn into a week. Each evening I venture out, a pilgrim on a sacred quest. I find the funcress, a tiny, unassuming plant with delicate white flowers, hidden in the marshy wetlands near Willow Creek, just as Arthur's notes predicted. Sphaerocardamom nesliiforme. The name feels like a secret password on my tongue. The last one is the hardest. The marsh bellflower. Arthur's notes are less precise here. It loves the acidic soil near the granite outcrop, but only after a fire has cleared the undergrowth. It is a flower born of devastation. A fire hadn't swept through here in years. Hope begins to wane. I spend 2 evenings searching the rocky outcrop, my old knees aching, my heart growing heavy. Was this the one key I would never find? On the 3rd evening, as the sun bleeds across the horizon, I see it. A flash of purple-blue against the gray stone. It's not a large patch, just a single defiant stalk, growing from a crevice where a lightning strike years ago must have scorched the earth and cleared the way. The marsh bellflower. Campanula aperonoides. It's beautiful, tenacious, a survivor. A flower that needs destruction in order to bloom. I sink to the ground, my back against the cool granite, and I look at the 3 names written in my notebook. Dendrophylax lindinii. Sphaerocardamom nesliiforme. Campanula aperonoides. The keys to Arthur's fortress. The words that will unlock my future and seal my son's fate. I am not just a botanist's widow anymore. I am the executor of his final brilliant plan. With the keys in hand, I need one more thing. The final undeniable proof. The weapon that will leave no room for doubt or legal maneuvering. I need Ethan's own voice. My approach to Maya is even more delicate this time. She has been watching me, her teenage face a canvas of conflicting emotions. The guilt is winning. I see it in the way she avoids my eyes, in the way she offers to make me tea or fetch me a blanket. She is trying to atone in small ways for the great sin she feels a part of. I find her in the garden one afternoon. I'm sitting on a bench, a book unopened in my lap. I have been watching her tend to the roses, her touch gentle unlike her mother's. Those were always your grandfather's favorites, I say softly as she approaches. She gives me a small sad smile. I know. I pat the bench beside me and she sits. We are quiet for a moment, the scent of the roses hanging between us. Your father seems so happy lately, I say, my voice wistful. I stare off into the distance as if speaking to myself. He and Sarah. They laugh so much in the evenings after I've gone to my room. It's nice to hear. He's finally getting everything he's ever wanted. I wish I could hear him celebrating. It would make this all easier. To know he's truly happy with his decision. I don't look at her. I don't need to. I can feel the words landing, each one a perfectly aimed dart piercing her conscience. I am not asking her to betray her father. I am not accusing her of anything. I am simply painting a picture of a lonely old woman who wants to share in her son's joy. A joy that is the very source of her own sorrow. It's a masterful, cruel stroke and I hate myself for it, but I do it anyway. The stakes are too high for sentiment. He sounds so proud. I add a final gentle twist of the knife. Proud of the deal he made. She says nothing. She just stands up, mumbles something about homework, and retreats into the house. But I have planted the seed. Guilt, left to fester in the mind of a teenager, is a powerful and unpredictable weed. The next day it bears fruit. I am in the living room, ostensibly sorting through a box of old photographs, when Maya comes downstairs. She is heading out to meet friends. She places her phone face down on the kitchen island. I'm heading out, she calls. Be back before dinner. Have a lovely time, dear, I call back. Her eyes meet mine for a fleeting second across the room. In them I see a storm of apology, fear, and resolve. Then she is gone. The phone remains on the counter, a silent sentinel. I know with absolute certainty that it is recording. I wait. My heart hammers against my ribs, a frantic bird in a cage. This is the most dangerous part of the plan. It relies on Ethan's arrogance, on his unshakable belief that I am a non-entity, deaf and dumb to the world he now commands. An hour later, I hear his car in the driveway. He and Sarah come in laughing about something. Their voices are loud, filling the space that Maya's guilty silence left behind. They move into the kitchen. I don't move a muscle from my chair in the living room. I am just a piece of the scenery, the old lady with her box of memories. God, I cannot wait for this to be over, Sarah says. I hear the refrigerator open, the clink of a wine bottle. Just 2 more weeks until she's at Golden Meadows, and we can get the real estate agent in here to list this place. And once the sterling deal officially closes jackpot, Ethan's voice is thick with smug satisfaction. I told you I could handle it. I have to admit, Sarah says, and I can picture her leaning against the counter swirling her wine. I was nervous about the signature. What if it wasn't good enough? What if she fought it? Ethan lets out a short, barking laugh. It's a sound that scrapes me raw. The old bat? Fight it? Sarah, she can barely remember what she had for breakfast. A few practice squiggles on a notepad, and her entire life is mine. I used her own fancy pen for God's sake. The irony. It was a masterpiece. Honestly, it was easier than forging Dad's signature for that loan back in college. The air freezes in my lungs. There it is. More than a confession. It's a history of fraud. Pattern of behavior. The final nail. You never told me you did that, Sarah says, her voice a mixture of shock and admiration. There's a lot you don't know, Ethan says, his voice dropping to a cocky, intimate murmur. He never even noticed. Too busy with his rocks and his dirt. Just like she was too busy with her flowers. They were always living in their own little worlds. Made it easy. I sit perfectly still, the old photographs a meaningless blur in my lap. I feel nothing. No shock, no fresh wave of pain. Just a profound, chilling cold. He hasn't just betrayed me. He has been betraying us, his parents, his entire life. He sees our passions not as a part of who we were, but as a weakness he could exploit. They move on, their conversation turning to new cars and a vacation in the Caribbean. I wait until I hear their footsteps go upstairs. Then I rise, my movements fluid and silent. I walk into the kitchen. The phone is still there. I pick it up, stop the recording, and slip it into my pocket. Feels as heavy as a handgun. Later that night, I forward the audio file to Robert Davies from my little burner phone, along with the 3 Latin names. The message is simple. I have everything. Let's begin. The air in the courtroom was cold and sterile, smelling of old paper, cheap floor polish, and the faint, collective anxiety of everyone within its wood-paneled walls. I sat beside Mr. Davies, my hands resting in my lap, one over the other. I had chosen my outfit with care. A simple gray dress, a cardigan my mother had knitted for me decades ago, and sensible worn shoes. I was playing the part they had written for me, the frail, confused old woman. It was a role I had been rehearsing for weeks, and by the looks of it, I was giving a convincing performance. Across the aisle, Ethan and Sarah sat with their lawyer, a man named Finch with a shark smile and eyes that seemed to calculate worth in dollars and cents. They weren't even trying to hide their confidence. Sarah whispered something to Ethan, and he let out a short, silent laugh, his shoulders shaking. He caught my eye and gave me a look that was meant to be pitying but was laced with a thick, syrupy contempt. It was the look of a victor offering condolences to the vanquished before the battle had even been fought. In the front row of the gallery, Mr. Sterling, the developer whose name was on the fraudulent contract, sat with his arms crossed, tapping an expensive shoe impatiently. For him, this was a minor bureaucratic hurdle, a formality before his bulldozers could begin their work of erasing my husband's legacy. All rise, the bailiff's voice boomed, and we stood as the judge entered. Judge Albright was a woman in her late 50s, with a reputation for being no nonsense but fair. Her eyes, however, swept over me with that same look of weary pity. My son and his wife had done their work well, painting me as a pitiable creature lost to the fog of age, a woman who couldn't remember signing away her own life. Mr. Finch began, his voice smooth and condescending. He laid out their case with a theatrical simplicity. Your Honor, this is a straightforward if unfortunate family matter. My client, Mr. Ethan Vance, loves his mother dearly. He gestured towards me. But as we all know, time can be unkind. Memories fade. Decisions made one day are forgotten the next. He placed a sheaf of papers on the evidence table with a crisp thud. This is a legally binding, notarized deed of sale for the property known as Willow Creek. Signed, as you can see, by Mrs. Olivia Vance. Her signature is right there, clear as day. He projected the document onto a large screen. My signature, or a perfect imitation of it, stared back at me. It was an uncanny forgery, a violation that felt more personal than any physical blow. We have a sworn statement from the notary public who witnessed the signing, Finch continued, his voice dripping with false sympathy. We have the contract. We have the payment, which was deposited into a joint account for Mrs. Vance's care. What we have here, Your Honor, is a simple case of seller's remorse, compounded by age-related memory loss. It's tragic, but it is not grounds to nullify a legal contract. Sterling Corp has acted in good faith, and my clients have acted out of a desire to secure their mother's future in a comfortable, safe environment. He was good. He was very good. He wrapped the cruelty in a blanket of concern, presenting their greed as an act of filial duty. Ethan looked on, nodding gravely, playing the part of the long-suffering son. Sarah dabbed at a dry eye with a tissue. The judge looked from the screen to me, her expression softening into what I knew was a prelude to a dismissal. The entire room saw me as a relic, a ghost already haunting the edges of my own life, clinging to something I had already given away in a moment of senile weakness. They thought the story was already over. They had no idea it was just beginning. Mr. Davies rose slowly. He was a man built of quiet deliberation, the polar opposite of the flashy Mr. Finch. He had been Arthur's lawyer and his friend. He adjusted his glasses and approached the bench, his movements calm and unhurried. The confidence on Ethan's face began to curdle into a slight impatience. He wanted this over with. "Your Honor," Mr. Davies began, his voice even and respectful, "we are not here today to dispute the appearance of the signature on that document." A murmur went through the courtroom. Mr. Finch smirked, as if Davies had just conceded the entire case. Ethan leaned back in his chair, a triumphant look spreading across his face. "Indeed," Davies continued, ignoring them, "it is a remarkable facsimile, a work of art in its own way. No, we are not here to dispute its shape. We are here to dispute its substance, its very essence." The judge leaned forward, her brow furrowed. "Counselor, please clarify." "With pleasure, Your Honor. I would like to call Dr. Alastair Finch, a forensic document and ink analyst, to the stand." A man with a neat white beard and a serious demeanor was sworn in. Mr. Davies established his credentials: decades with the FBI, hundreds of high-profile cases. Then he got to the point. "Dr. Finch," Davies said, holding up a plastic evidence bag containing my Montblanc pen, "do you recognize this pen?" "I do. It was provided to my lab for analysis." "And did you analyze the ink residue found within the nib of this pen?" "Yes, using gas chromatography and mass spectrometry." "And could you tell the court about your findings?" "The ink is a common, inexpensive carbon-based black ink, commercially available from dozens of manufacturers. Nothing special about it." Mr. Davies then gestured to the deed of sale, which was now in an evidence sleeve on the witness stand. "Doctor, did you also analyze the ink used on this document?" "I did." "And what did you find?" "I found two chemically distinct inks, Your Honor," Dr. Finch said, turning to the judge. "The body of the text, the printed clauses, the notary's signature and stamp, they were all executed with a standard oil-based ink consistent with high-quality office printers and notary supplies. The signature, however, Mrs. Olivia Vance's signature." He paused for effect. The courtroom was silent. Ethan had stopped smiling. "The signature," Dr. Finch continued, "was signed using a water-based ink with a completely different chemical composition. An ink that is, in fact, a perfect chemical match, down to the specific batch impurities, to the cheap black ink found in the nib of that Montblanc fountain pen." My gaze drifted to Ethan. The color was draining from his face. I remembered that day so clearly, finding my pen on his desk, the nib stained with an unfamiliar watery black ink instead of my customary royal blue. He had been practicing. He had been tracing my name over and over, until his hand knew its every curve and flourish. But in his arrogance, in his haste, he had overlooked the one thing he couldn't replicate, the very substance of the lie. Mr. Davies pressed on. "So, to be clear, Doctor, the signature that purports to legitimize this entire multi-million-dollar transaction was written in a different ink from the rest of the document." "That is correct. And this different ink is an identical match to the ink found in my client's pen, a pen that, according to my client, was briefly taken from her room and returned shortly before this document was allegedly signed?" "Objection." Mr. Finch was on his feet. "Hearsay. Speculation." "Sustained," the judge said, though her eyes were now fixed on Ethan, cold and hard. "The witness will stick to his expert findings." "Of course, Your Honor," Davies said calmly. "I have no further questions for this witness." A crack had appeared in their perfect facade. It was a hairline fracture, but it was there. Sarah was now fidgeting with the strap of her purse, her composure beginning to fray. Ethan stared straight ahead, his jaw so tight I could see the muscle bunching under his skin. He was no longer the concerned son. He was a cornered animal. But he still believed he could escape. He still believed the lie was strong enough. "Your Honor," Mr. Davies said, his voice dropping slightly, becoming more somber, "the fraudulent nature of the ink is troubling. It speaks to a clear intent to deceive. but it is only a symptom of a much deeper, more personal betrayal. He held a small digital audio recorder in his hand. Before the court is a question of my client's mental state. Mr. Finch has painted a picture of a forgetful, confused woman. The defense would like to present evidence that demonstrates a very different reality. Evidence of a calculated, cruel campaign of manipulation. In the perpetrator's own words. Objection! Finch shouted, jumping up again. Improper foundation. We have no idea what that is or where it came from. It is a recording, Your Honor, Davies said smoothly, made in the kitchen of my client's home. And I believe Mr. Ethan Vance will recognize his own voice. The judge looked at Davies, then at Ethan, whose face had turned a waxy, pale gray. I'll allow it, she said, her voice firm. Proceed, counselor. Mr. Davies pressed a button. For a moment, there was only the faint hiss of static. And then Sarah's voice, clear and sharp. Are you sure she's not going to make a fuss? She seemed upset. Then Ethan's voice filled the courtroom. It was smug, arrogant, and dripping with disdain. My son's voice. She's an old woman, Sarah. She'll be upset for a day and then she'll forget. It's for the best. Her signature was ridiculously easy, by the way. All those years of watching her write checks. Her hand has gotten so shaky, it actually made the forgery more convincing. A perfect steady signature would have been a dead giveaway. A collective gasp rippled through the gallery. I saw Maya, my granddaughter, who had been sitting in the back, put a hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. She was looking at her father as if for the first time. Sarah's recorded voice was more nervous. I don't know, Ethan. Feels wrong. What if they look into it? And then came the words that sealed his fate. The words that would echo longer and louder than any lie. Ethan's voice laughed, a low, ugly sound. Look into what? A piece of paper? Sarah, relax. This isn't my first rodeo. You think Dad never found out I signed his name on that permission slip for the geology trip to the Grand Canyon? Or co-signed that first car loan application? He knew. He always knew. He just didn't have the guts to do anything about it. He was weak. I'm not. This land is our future, not her past. She's had her life. It's our turn. Silence. A profound, ringing silence fell over the courtroom. It was heavier than any sound. Every eye was on Ethan. His mask of filial piety had not just cracked. It had been vaporized, leaving behind the raw, ugly face of his greed. Sarah had buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Ethan just stared at me, his eyes filled with a pure black hatred I had never seen before. In that moment he wasn't my son. He was a stranger who had been living in my house, eating my food and patiently waiting for me to die. The judge stared at Ethan for a long, cold moment before turning her attention back to Mr. Davies. Her face was a mask of stone. The pity was gone, replaced by a glacial fury. Mr. Davies let the silence hang for another beat before he spoke, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of a final judgment. He walked back to his table and picked up another thicker file. Your Honor, he said, and the words were like ice. The fraud, the forgery, the appalling emotional abuse you've just heard, it's all secondary. He let that sink in. Mr. Finch, looking utterly defeated, could only stare, his mouth slightly agape. Mr. Sterling, the developer, was now on the edge of his seat, his face a mask of confusion and growing dread. The truth is, Davies continued, this sale would be void even if my client had signed it herself, in sound mind and body, with her own pen and her favorite ink. It would be void because my client's son attempted to sell something he had absolutely no right to. He opened the file. I present to the court the last will and testament of Arthur Vance, my client's late husband. He placed a copy before the judge. Please direct your attention to Article 4, Section B. Arthur was a brilliant geologist, Your Honor. He was also a man who, as we've just heard, knew his son's character all too well. He included what he referred to in his private journals as a poison pill clause. Davies took a deep breath. The clause stipulates that the surface rights to the 200-acre Willow Creek property cannot be severed, sold, or otherwise transferred separately from the subterranean mineral rights. A low murmur started in the gallery again. Mr. Sterling shot a panicked look at his own legal team, who were now scrambling through their paperwork with frantic energy. "And where are those mineral rights, Mr. Davies?" the judge asked, her eyes scanning the will. "They are and always have been locked in a digital trust," Davies announced. "A trust that was legally activated upon the filing of this fraudulent deed of sale. A trust whose sole beneficiary and controller is Mrs. Olivia Vance." He placed a final document on the judge's bench. It was the printout from the trust, my name clearly at the top, activated just last week. The key to that trust, the password Arthur had created, was a sequence of the botanical names of the rarest flowers that grew on our land. A code only a botanist could decipher. A secret language between a husband and a wife, reaching out from beyond the grave to protect me. Mr. Sterling leaped to his feet. "What? What mineral rights? My survey showed nothing. This is absurd," he yelled, pointing a trembling finger at his own lawyers. "You told me this was clean." Mr. Davies held up a hand. "Your Honor, Mr. Sterling's survey was for structural stability. It was not a geological deep scan. My client's husband, Arthur Vance, conducted his own surveys for 40 years. He knew every inch of that land above and below." He turned and for the first time looked directly at Ethan, whose face was a blank canvas of shock. "Your son, Mrs. Vance, tried to steal a property he valued at a few $1,000,000 for a resort. He was so blinded by that, he never bothered to look deeper. He never understood what the land truly held." Mr. Davies turned back to the judge, his voice ringing with the final, brutal truth. "Arthur Vance's journals and geological surveys, which are now in the possession of the trust, chart one of the richest deposits of rare earth minerals in this state. Neodymium dysprosium, essential for modern technology, an estimated value, Your Honor, of at least $10 million. The sound Mr. Sterling made was somewhere between a gasp and a choke. He collapsed back into his seat as if his bones had turned to water. His multi-million-dollar eco-resort was built on a foundation of legal and literal quicksand. But I wasn't looking at him. I was looking at Ethan. He had tried to steal my past and my future for a fraction of what he had thrown away. In his desperate greed, he had been blind to the real treasure, a treasure that was now, and had always been, mine. He hadn't just lost the land. He had lost a fortune he never even knew existed." The gavel fell, the sound cracking through the stunned silence like a gunshot. But I barely heard it. I just looked at the shattered man who was my son, a thief who had been outsmarted by a ghost, a botanist, and the very earth he had tried to sell. The harvest had come, and it was made of thorns. The gavel fell, but the sound was not a crack of thunder. It was a dull final thud, like a heavy stone dropped into a deep well. It absorbed all the noise in the courtroom, pulling the whispers, the shuffling feet, the nervous coughs down into a profound silence. For a moment the world held its breath. I felt the stillness in my own lungs, a pressure behind my ribs that wasn't fear, but a strange hollow anticipation. The judge, a man whose face I had studied for days but could not truly see, cleared his throat. His voice was dispassionate, a simple vessel for the words that would now alter the landscape of our lives forever. "On the charge of felony forgery," he began, his eyes fixed on a point just above Ethan's head, "this court finds the defendant, Ethan Miller, guilty." A gasp rippled through the gallery. Sarah beside him made a small choked sound like a wounded animal. Her manicured hand flew to her mouth, her perfectly applied lipstick suddenly looking garish and out of place. Ethan didn't move. He stood ramrod straight, his expensive suit suddenly looking like a costume he'd forgotten to take off. "On the charge of elder fraud," the judge continued, his voice an unwavering metronome of consequence, "this court finds the defendant guilty." This time Sarah let out a sob. It was sharp and theatrical, but beneath it, I could hear the genuine terror of a world imploding. Mr. Sterling, the developer, who had been sitting with his own smug legal team, slowly sank back in his chair. The predatory gleam in his eyes had been extinguished, replaced by the flat, stunned look of a gambler who had just lost everything on a single miscalculated bet. His future was now entangled with my son's crimes. And on the charge of perjury, the judge concluded, his gaze finally dropping to meet Ethan's. This court finds the defendant guilty. That was when Ethan finally moved. It wasn't a flinch or a collapse. It was a subtle shift, a hardening. His shoulders, which had been tensed with a desperate arrogance, now seemed to set like concrete. The last vestiges of the charming, persuasive son I once knew evaporated under the harsh fluorescent lights of the courtroom, leaving behind something raw and terrifyingly unfamiliar. Two bailiffs moved with practiced ease, flanking him. The metallic click of handcuffs closing around his wrists was brutally loud in the stunned quiet. Sarah cried out his name, a desperate wail, and tried to reach for him, but a female officer gently but firmly held her back. And then, as the bailiffs began to lead him away, his head turned. His eyes found mine across the courtroom. I had prepared myself for this moment. I had expected to see shame, or perhaps a flicker of regret. I had even braced myself for the desperate plea of a cornered child. I saw none of that. What I saw was a gaze so pure in its venom, so unclouded by any other emotion, that it felt like a physical blow. It was a hatred that burned away everything else. Our shared history, the blood in our veins, the love I had poured into him for over 40 years. In his eyes, I was not his mother. I was an obstacle, an old stubborn weed that he had failed to uproot, and for that, he would never forgive me. He was not a son grieving his failure. He was a con man furious at being outsmarted, the architect of his own ruin, blaming the building for falling. I held his gaze. I did not look away. I did not offer a tear, a nod of pity, or a shiver of fear. I simply met the inferno with the cool, quiet stillness of the earth he had tried to steal. And in that long, silent exchange I felt nothing. Not victory. There was no joy in this, no triumphant surge. Seeing my only child in chains was not a prize to be won. Not sadness. The grief for the son I thought I had, the boy who loved my stories and held my hand in the garden, had already been spent. I had shed those tears in the lonely silence of my room, night after night, as the truth of his betrayal settled into my bones. What was left to grieve? A mirage? No, what I felt was something else entirely. It was the cold, clean emptiness that follows a necessary amputation. The feeling a surgeon must have after cutting away a limb consumed by gangrene to save the rest of the body. There is a profound sense of loss, a visible void where something once was. But there is also the stark, sterile relief of survival. The knowledge that the poison has been removed, the infection has been stopped. The body, though scarred and irrevocably changed, can now begin to heal. He was gone. The bailiffs led him through a side door, and the heavy wood clicked shut behind him. A final, definitive period on a chapter of my life. Sarah collapsed into her chair, her sobs now ragged and uncontained. Lawyers began to murmur, packing their briefcases. The play was over. The actors were leaving the stage. I remained seated, my hands resting in my lap, feeling the phantom weight of the limb I had just lost. The noise of that day, the gavel, the verdict, Sarah's weeping eventually faded. It took a few days, the sound slowly leaching out of my memory, replaced by a quiet that felt both vast and unfamiliar. It was the silence of a house no longer filled with the static of unspoken resentment or the sharp edges of false pleasantries. First, it was unnerving. I would find myself tensing, waiting for the sound of Ethan's heavy footsteps, or the saccharine sweet tone Sarah used when she wanted something. But the sounds never came. I drove back to the land a week later. I didn't plan it. My car just seemed to know the way, a faithful old horse heading for its home pasture. I parked by the familiar gate and walked. The air was different here, cleaner. It smelled of damp soil, pine needles, and the subtle sweet perfume of late-blooming wildflowers that Arthur and I had planted decades ago. The ground was soft under my worn boots, a forgiving welcome. I walked the path we had worn through the years, my hand brushing against the rough bark of the trees like I was greeting old friends. I made my way to the great oak that stood at the heart of the property, its massive branches reaching for the sky like ancient, gnarled arms. This was Arthur's favorite spot. It was where we had our picnics, where he'd read his geology journals aloud to me, where I had finally scattered his ashes, letting him become one with the earth he so loved. I looked towards the road, to the spot where the garish sold sign had been hammered into the ground. It was gone now. All that remained were two small, disturbed patches of earth, already being reclaimed by creeping grass. It was a scar, but a small one, a reminder of a wound that had closed. Standing there under the sheltering canopy of the oak, I felt the full weight of the new silence. It wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with the rustle of leaves, the distant call of a hawk, the gentle hum of the world breathing around me. This was the peace I had fought for. This was Arthur's legacy, my sanctuary. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a jarring electronic intrusion into the organic peace. I pulled it out, my thumb hovering over the screen. It was a message from a number I didn't recognize at first, but my heart knew. It was from Maya. 14 words. Each one a tiny fragile seed being planted in scorched earth. I'm so sorry, Grandma. Can I come see you? Tears pricked my eyes, the first I had allowed myself to feel since the trial. They weren't tears of sadness or of joy, but of a quiet, overwhelming release. It was the feeling of a long-frozen river finally beginning to thaw. A single crack in the ice, promising the return of life. I didn't reply immediately. I simply read the words again and again, letting them sink in. Hope was a dangerous thing, but perhaps it was also a necessary one. I looked up through the intricate lattice of oak leaves, to the vast, patient sky. I thought of Ethan. I thought of his rage, his greed, the chilling ease with which he had tried to erase me. He had used my name, my love, my trust as tools for his own selfish ends. But his crime was deeper than that. He didn't just forge my name. He tried to forge my reality, to write me out of my own story. He tried to convince me, and the world, that I was a fading, incoherent postscript to a life already lived. He tried to make me invisible. He forgot that this land holds our history. Its roots run deeper than any lie. Its stones remember every season, every promise, every betrayal. And the earth does not forget. The earth does not forgive.